Welcome back to Visions Beyond. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel and leave a comment letting us know what deep dives you'd like to see in the future. It's 2025 and we're all still kind of navigating this world that's been shaped by COVID-19. So today we're going to do a deep dive into the latest COVID symptoms. It's like the virus has decided to throw us a symptom parade, and some of the floats are pretty unexpected.
It really is remarkable how this virus continues to keep us on our toes. To help you stay ahead of the curve, we've gathered some really intriguing insights from sources like the NHS, the New Zealand Ministry of Health, NBC Chicago Mount Sinai, UC Davis Healthline, and the Mayo Clinic. These sources all highlight how the virus is evolving and the sometimes surprising symptoms that people are experiencing.
Okay, so let's unpack this symptom parade. We're all familiar with the classic COVID symptoms, fever, cough, fatigue. Are those still the main attractions, or have they been bumped down the lineup?
You're right, those classic symptoms are still very much present. But what's fascinating is that they can often mimic other illnesses like the flu, a common cold, or even allergies. So if you're feeling under the weather, it's more important than ever to get tested to know for sure what you're dealing with.
That makes a lot of sense. Testing helps us avoid those guessing games. But I have to ask about these new COVID symptoms I keep hearing about. Some of them sound, well, a bit out there.
Yeah, some of these newer symptoms are definitely raising eyebrows. We're seeing reports of things like night sweats, skin rashes, and even eye irritation.
Eye irritation. Now that's one I haven't heard before. How is a respiratory virus even linked to our eyes?
It's a good question, and it speaks to the complexity of how this virus interacts with our bodies. Think about it. Our eyes, like our nose and mouth, have mucous membranes, which can be entry points for viruses. So it's possible that the virus could directly infect the tissues in and around the eyes, leading to irritation.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like the virus is trying to sneak in through any open door it can find. But it gets even weirder, right? I've read about people experiencing hearing issues and even hair loss.
You're right. Those are some of the more surprising symptoms that have been reported. Now, it's important to emphasize that these symptoms are not as common as the classic ones, and the research into these connections is still ongoing.
So we're still in the early stages of understanding how these seemingly unrelated symptoms might be linked to COVID.
Exactly. It's a bit of a medical mystery that researchers are trying to unravel, but there are a few possible explanations that are being explored. For example, some researchers believe that the virus might trigger an autoimmune response in some individuals where the body's immune system mistakenly attacks its own healthy cells. This could potentially explain symptoms like hair loss, which can be associated with certain autoimmune disorders.
So it's not necessarily the virus directly causing these symptoms, but rather the body's response to the virus.
That's one of the leading theories. It's like the immune system gets a little overzealous in its fight against the virus and ends up causing collateral damage.
That's a really helpful way to think about it. It's not just about the virus itself, but the ripple effects it can have throughout the body. But are these unusual symptoms always a sign of long COVID?
Long COVID is definitely a part of the conversation, but it's not the whole story. Some of these less common symptoms might be related to the body's acute response to the virus during the initial infection, while others could be a manifestation of long COVID where symptoms persist for weeks, months, or even longer after the initial infection.
So we're talking about a whole spectrum of possibilities here, from short-term reactions to long-term consequences. It really highlights how much we still have to learn about this virus.
Absolutely. The research into long COVID is particularly crucial because it's helping us understand the potential for lasting impacts, even in people who experience mild or asymptomatic cases initially.
That's definitely something to keep in mind. It's not just about getting through those initial weeks of feeling sick. It's about understanding the potential for long-term health effects.
Mm.
But speaking of feeling sick, let's get back to that symptom parade. What are some of the other unusual floats we might encounter?
Well, some people have reported experiencing brain fog, which can manifest as difficulty concentrating, remembering things, or making decisions. This could be due to the virus's potential to affect the central nervous system.
Brain fog. I've definitely felt that before, and it's not fun. It's like your brain is stuck in first gear. And what about those gastrointestinal issues? It seems like those have been getting more attention lately.
Yes, we're seeing reports of gastrointestinal symptoms beyond just nausea. Some people are experiencing diarrhea, stomach pain, and even changes in their bowel habits. This suggests that the virus might affect the gut microbiome, which is the community of bacteria that live in our digestive system.
Wow. So this virus is like a multi-headed hydra affecting all these different parts of the body. You mentioned changes in bowel habits. Are we also seeing changes in other bodily functions?
Yes. In fact, there have been reports of menstrual cycle changes in some women. This could be due to the virus's impact on hormone regulation or the body's overall stress response to infection.
That's fascinating. It really highlights the interconnectedness of our body systems and how a virus like this can disrupt those delicate balances. But with all these new symptoms emerging, how do we know when to worry? When is it just a case of the sniffles, and when is it something more serious?
That's a great question, and it's important to distinguish between the symptoms that are generally considered mild and those that warrant immediate medical attention. If you're experiencing difficulty breathing, persistent chest pain, confusion, or a bluish tint to your lips or face, those are red flags that should not be ignored.
Okay, so those are the signs that things are escalating and we need to seek help right away. It's almost like the virus is sending up flares, letting us know that it's time to call in reinforcements.
Exactly. Don't hesitate to seek medical advice if you're experiencing any of those severe symptoms. Early intervention can make a significant difference in managing the illness and preventing complications.
That's a powerful reminder that we need to listen to our bodies and not try to tough it out if things feel truly wrong. But for those milder symptoms, is it still just a matter of riding it out at home and hoping for the best?
Well, even with milder symptoms, it's still essential to take steps to protect yourself and others. Isolation remains a key strategy for preventing further spread. The current guidelines recommend staying home until your symptoms improve and you're fever-free for at least 24 hours without the use of fever-reducing medications.
So it's more about listening to your body and not pushing yourself to return to work or school too soon, even if you've tested negative.
Exactly. It's about taking a responsible approach and prioritizing both your own recovery and the well-being of those around you.
It sounds like the old adage, better safe than sorry, still holds true in this era of evolving COVID symptoms. But let's be honest, it can all feel a bit overwhelming, can it? New symptoms, new variants, shifting guidelines, it's a lot to keep up with. Why does it seem like this virus is constantly changing the game?
Viruses, especially RNA viruses like SARS-CoV-2, are incredibly adaptable. They're constantly mutating, which is like making tiny changes to their genetic code. Sometimes these mutations result in variants that are more transmissible, meaning they spread more easily. Other times, mutations can affect the severity of the disease or the types of symptoms people experience.
So it's like the virus is playing a game of evolutionary chess, always trying to stay one step ahead of our immune systems.
That's a great analogy. As our population builds immunity through vaccination and prior infections, the virus faces pressure to adapt and survive. These new variants are essentially its way of trying to find new hosts and continue spreading.
It's almost like a never-ending arms race, with the virus constantly evolving and our immune systems trying to keep pace. But amidst all this change, is there anything that stayed the same? Are there any constants in this ever-shifting landscape of COVID?
One thing that remains constant is the importance of taking proactive steps to protect ourselves and others. Vaccination continues to be our strongest defense against severe illness, hospitalization, and death. And staying up to date on booster shots is crucial because those boosters help our immune systems keep pace with the evolving variants.
So those boosters aren't just a one-time thing. We need to keep getting them as new variants emerge.
Exactly. It's like updating your phone's software. You need those updates to keep your phone running smoothly and protect it from new threats. Boosters work similarly, providing our immune systems with the latest information to fight off those evolving variants.
Okay, that's a helpful way to think about it. But beyond vaccinations, what else can we do to stay safe in this ever-changing world of COVID?
Those everyday habits we've all become accustomed to are still vital. Washing our hands frequently with soap and water, or using hand sanitizer when soap isn't available, remains a highly effective way to prevent the spread of germs.
It seems like those basic hygiene practices we learned back in kindergarten are still our best friends.
Absolutely. Simple but powerful. And of course, covering our coughs and sneezes with a tissue or our elbow helps prevent those respiratory droplets from spreading to others.
All tried and true methods. But what about masks? Do we still need those in 2025?
Mask recommendations have evolved as our understanding of the virus has progressed. The CDC and other health organizations now generally recommend mask wearing in certain situations, such as crowded indoor settings, healthcare facilities, and on public transportation. This is especially important during periods of high community transmission or if you're at higher risk for severe illness.
So it's more about being aware of your surroundings and making informed decisions about when a mask is appropriate.
Exactly. It's about assessing your personal risk, the level of community spread, and the setting you're in. It's a nuanced approach, but it allows for more flexibility while still prioritizing safety.
This all boils down to personal responsibility and staying informed. It seems like the key takeaway is that we're learning to live with COVID-19 as a part of our lives, but we're not powerless against it. We have tools and knowledge to manage the risks and protect ourselves and our communities.
Well said. We've come a long way since the early days of the pandemic. We have a much better understanding of the virus-effective vaccines and a wider array of treatment options. While the virus continues to evolve, so does our ability to adapt and respond.
It's encouraging to hear that we're not just standing still, we're making progress.
Absolutely. Ongoing research is shedding light on long COVID. New treatment approaches are being developed, and public health strategies are adapting to the changing landscape of the virus. It's an ongoing process, but we're moving in the right direction.
That's definitely a message of hope that I think we all need to hear. So to recap, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored those classic COVID symptoms, these intriguing new ones popping up, and the ever-evolving nature of this virus. And we've discussed ways to stay safe in 2025, from the importance of vaccination and boosters to those simple yet effective hygiene practices. But we're not done yet. We have a lot more to unpack, and I'm eager to hear what other insights you have to share. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
It's fascinating how this virus keeps throwing us these curveballs. It's like it's constantly adapting and finding new ways to challenge our understanding.
Yeah, it definitely feels like we're in a constant game of catch-up, trying to stay ahead of the virus's next move. But you mentioned something really interesting before we took a pause, the idea that even mild cases of COVID could have long-term consequences. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. You see, research into long COVID is shedding light on the potential for lasting impacts, even in people who experienced mild or asymptomatic cases initially. We're talking about a wide range of symptoms that can linger for weeks, months, or even longer after the initial infection.
So it's not just about getting through those initial weeks of feeling sick. It's about understanding the potential for long-term health effects.
Yeah.
It's almost like the virus can leave a lasting footprint on the body even after the acute infection has subsided.
That's a great way to put it. It's like the virus leaves behind a sort of echo, a subtle reminder of its presence. And these echoes can manifest in various ways. Some people experience fatigue that lingers for months, making it difficult to return to their pre-COVID energy levels. Others report brain fog, struggling to concentrate or remember things as easily as they did before.
It's almost like the virus throws a wrench into the body's finely tuned machinery. And even after the wrench is removed, the machinery isn't quite running as smoothly as it used to.
Exactly. And the impact can extend beyond physical symptoms. Some individuals with long COVID report changes in their mood, experiencing anxiety, depression, or even post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
Wow. So this virus isn't just affecting our physical health, it's also impacting our mental and emotional well-being. It really highlights the interconnectedness of our mind and body.
One of the most concerning aspects of long COVID is that we're still learning about its full scope and potential long-term consequences. Research is ongoing to understand the underlying mechanisms of long COVID and to develop effective treatments and support strategies for those affected.
It sounds like long COVID is a bit of a medical mystery that we're still trying to solve. But amidst all this uncertainty, is there anything we can do to protect ourselves from these potential long-term effects?
Well, the good news is that vaccination remains our strongest weapon in the fight against COVID-19, including long COVID. Studies have shown that vaccination can significantly reduce the risk of developing long COVID, even if you do experience a breakthrough infection.
So getting vaccinated isn't just about preventing those initial weeks of feeling sick. It's also about reducing the risk of long-term complications. It's like investing in our future health.
Exactly. And it's never too late to get vaccinated. Even if you've already had COVID, vaccination can offer additional protection against future infections and potentially reduce the risk of developing long COVID.
That's encouraging to hear. It's like, even if we've already encountered the virus, we can still take steps to fortify our defenses. But beyond vaccination, are there any other lifestyle factors that might influence our risk of developing long COVID?
That's a great question, and it's an area of active research. Some studies suggest that certain lifestyle factors, such as maintaining a healthy weight, eating a balanced diet, getting regular exercise, and managing stress, might play a role in promoting overall immune health and potentially reducing the risk of long COVID.
So it's those same healthy habits we always hear about, but in the context of COVID, they take on even greater significance. It's like those healthy habits are our allies in this fight against the virus.
That's a great way to think about it. It's about empowering ourselves with the tools we need to stay as healthy as possible in the face of this ongoing pandemic.
It's about taking ownership of our health and not just leaving it to chance. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about those evolving guidelines you mentioned earlier. I remember all the talk about a 5-day isolation period if you tested positive. Is that still the case?
You're right. There have been some updates to the guidelines. The CDC, for example, has shifted away from a fixed 5-day isolation period to a more symptom-based approach. The recommendation now is to stay home until your symptoms improve, and you're fever-free for at least 24 hours without the use of fever-reducing medications. This aligns with how we manage other respiratory illnesses.
So it's more about listening to your body and not pushing yourself to return to work or school too soon, even if you've tested negative.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that everyone recovers at their own pace and allowing your body the time it needs to fully recuperate.
It's about respecting the healing process and not trying to rush it. But what about those newer, less common symptoms we talked about earlier? Are there any specific precautions we should be taking to address those?
That's a great question, and it highlights the importance of staying informed. As we learn more about the virus and its potential long-term effects, public health guidelines will continue to evolve. For now, the best approach is to remain vigilant about monitoring your health and seeking medical advice if you experience any unusual or concerning symptoms. Early detection and treatment can make a significant difference in managing these potential complications.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, we're in a bit of a transition period. We're learning more about the long-term impacts of COVID, even mild cases, and how the virus is continuing to evolve. It's not just about avoiding those initial weeks of feeling sick anymore. It's about understanding the potential for lingering effects and protecting our long-term health.
That's a very insightful observation. The focus is shifting towards a more holistic understanding of COVID-19 and its potential to influence our health in various ways. This includes recognizing that even those who experience mild or asymptomatic infections might face long-term consequences.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on the potential long-term impacts of COVID, both the known and the unknown. But let's face it, all this talk about new symptoms and long COVID can feel a bit daunting. Is there any good news to be found in all of this?
Well, the good news is that we're not starting from scratch. We have knowledge, experience, and tools at our disposal that we didn't have a few years ago.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines and forget how far we've come in our understanding and management of this virus.
Exactly. We've learned so much about the virus and how to manage it. We have effective vaccines, antiviral treatments, and a better understanding of the long-term implications. We're in a much stronger position now than we were in the early days of the pandemic.
That is definitely reassuring. But I think what's sticking with me the most from our conversation today is the emphasis on staying informed and adaptable. This virus isn't going away anytime soon, and it's going to keep throwing curveballs our way.
You're absolutely right. The key is to be prepared for those curveballs. Stay up to date on the latest recommendations from health authorities. Pay attention to new research findings, and be willing to adjust our behaviors as needed. It's all about being proactive rather than reactive.
Being proactive, I like that. It's about taking ownership of our health and making informed decisions based on the best available information. It's not about living in fear, it's about living with awareness.
Precisely.
Okay.
And that awareness extends beyond ourselves to our communities. By taking steps to protect ourselves, we also contribute to protecting those around us, especially those who are more vulnerable.
It's that collective responsibility that has helped us get through this far, and it's what will continue to see us through. But we've covered so much in this deep dive. I need to catch my breath and process all this information. Let's take a quick pause and come back for a final wrap-up. Okay, so we're back. And it's funny. What's really sticking with me from our conversation today is how much we're still learning about COVID-19.
You're absolutely right. It's like we're peeling back the layers of an onion, and with each layer we uncover new complexities and mysteries.
It's like we're on this ongoing journey of discovery, and the destination keeps shifting as the virus evolves.
Precisely. And that's what makes this virus so fascinating, and at times so frustrating. Just when we think we have a handle on it, it throws us a curveball, like those new and unusual symptoms we discussed earlier.
Right, like the eye irritation and hair loss. Who would thought those could be linked to COVID-19? It really highlights how much we still don't know about the long-term impacts of this virus.
And that brings us to a crucial point: the importance of ongoing research. We need to continue investing in research to understand the long-term effects of COVID-19, both for those who experience severe illness and those who have mild or even asymptomatic cases.
So it's not just about treating the immediate symptoms, it's about understanding the potential for lasting consequences and developing strategies to mitigate those consequences.
Exactly. And that research needs to encompass a wide range of areas, from the biological mechanisms of long COVID to the social and economic impacts of this ongoing pandemic.
Thinking about the broader impacts of this virus, one thing that comes to mind is the potential strain on healthcare systems. If we're seeing an increase in long COVID cases, that could put a significant burden on healthcare providers and resources.
That's a very important point. The long-term health effects of COVID-19 could have ripple effects throughout our healthcare systems, potentially leading to increased wait times for appointments, shortages of specialized care providers, and higher healthcare costs.
It's almost like we need to start thinking about long COVID not just as an individual health issue, but as a public health challenge that requires a comprehensive and coordinated response.
I couldn't agree more. We need to start planning for the long-term impacts of COVID-19 and ensure that our healthcare systems are equipped to provide the necessary care and support for those who need it.
It's like we need to shift from a reactive approach to a more proactive one, anticipating the challenges that long COVID might pose and preparing for them in advance.
And that proactive approach includes not only strengthening our healthcare infrastructure, but also investing in research to develop effective treatments and support strategies for long COVID.
It's like we need a multi-pronged approach tackling this challenge from all angles. But, thinking about all of this, it can feel a bit overwhelming. What can we as individuals do to make a difference in this fight against COVID-19 and its long-term effects?
Well, first and foremost, we can continue to prioritize those preventative measures we've discussed, like vaccination booster shots and those simple but effective hygiene practices.
So those tried and true strategies are still our best line of defense.
Absolutely. They might seem basic, but they remain incredibly powerful in reducing the spread of the virus and protecting ourselves and others.
Beyond those individual actions, is there anything else we can do to contribute to the larger effort?
Well, we can advocate for increased funding for long COVID research and support services. We can also raise awareness about long COVID within our communities and encourage those who are experiencing long-term symptoms to seek medical advice.
So it's about using our voices and our actions to push for change and support those who are struggling with the long-term effects of this virus.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together and that collective action is essential in addressing this complex and evolving challenge.
Hearing you talk about this, it strikes me that despite all the uncertainty and challenges, there's also a sense of hope amidst all of this. We're learning more every day, new treatments are being developed, and we're starting to understand the long-term impacts so we can better prepare for them.
That's a great observation. And it's important to hold on to that sense of hope. We've come a long way since the early days of the pandemic, and we'll continue to learn and adapt as this virus evolves.
It's like we're navigating uncharted waters. But we're not alone in this journey. We have each other, we have science, and we have the resilience of the human spirit.
Well said. We're all in this together, and together we'll find our way through.
What a powerful message to end on. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of COVID-19 symptoms in 2025, what's the one key takeaway you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Stay curious, stay informed, and stay hopeful. We've got this.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into COVID-19 symptoms in 2025. We've covered a lot of ground today, from those classic symptoms to the newer ones popping up, and from the importance of vaccination to the complexities of long COVID. I hope you found this deep dive insightful and empowering. Remember, knowledge is power, and by staying informed, we can make more informed decisions about our health and well-being. And before we go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Visions Beyond, and leave a comment letting us know what deep dives you'd like to see in the future. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay well.